And we have begun together and we can begin to make everything that's out there. We comprehend the things we last in the sea. Everything that will get you eventually you will find a thrill every life we might be. Should be okay. Right now before you stay and everything that's remember I see you as we go through the day that has been everything is sent to make us aware that we expect and all that had never collected because you're a place where you and I are going to be. Everything that came to us once upon a time in these days when we were faltering because we lost the faith. Oh my, did you soul, did your spirit light tonight? Did you feel like you were going on everything's right? We'd be able to make it to a place where everything is outside. No, coming in, don't play the guitar, so that I will weep as just try to take a fall to a mountain where I'll see Charlie again, and you know the devil won't be there, and he will be this man who decided to challenge me and you when we stood up for everything we all know was right for me. Ooh, as the race seems away, everything that we want on time, baby, and put on display so we will live another day. We may not be able to throw away everything that's happening to you and me. So let the breezes from the butterflies will be the one who will carry everything to you again, so that your soul can sing. So everybody will understand everything that is going on within this life. Can you come me? How can you realize what is taking touch all of us deep inside? Before which we once again give up our life. Well, midnight realm, everybody. Sorry, I'm a little late with the introduction. I just got in the mood to sing because I get sick and fucking tired of waiting for the goddamn freaking internet to freaking get going, you know? So I sit there and I just like sing before the freaking thing gets on, and then when the freaking thing starts, it's freaking in the middle of the song. I'm like, what the heck's going on? So I don't even get a chance to say hello. Anyway, my bad. I shouldn't get so anxious and upset about not getting a proper chance to say hello to someone I like or love or anything like that. They're not like these little spirits, these crazy angels that deserve to die. But the reason when I cry, I come floating down when I think of someone with the potential so that everybody can see, everybody can be happy about, the perfection that's in my mind and theirs, thinking about how perfect they are. Just like I love it when news flip us that fast, Ain't that great? But hey, wouldn't you understand? Hey, you found me, here I am, warrior, young man, living, surviving. Everybody can. Some say Jesus, some say devil, some say just myself on another level. I'm here to explain and describe everything to you. One time I was with my life. Oh my. Can you hear the craziness inside of yourself as you see the sun pierce the night? And yet you won't be resting at your side. For once you felt alive and you carried yourself into a place where you belong. Be able to make a way in ways you surely will never end. And we'll always find ourselves a place where we all get met. The rooms they will fight their what should be. We live one night before and before we got angry. We we carry ourselves from sea to sea, so that everybody will be able to have a piece of me and you. We're giving away a piece of ourselves to everything that we do. So to understand when you come to this end, you're going to be like, oh, this time will take a long time. We're going to go further than around that. You're going to have to leave the right and walk home because the left and the right is going to be there tonight. So I'm going to care. It will be the day to explain everything once upon a time. When you get there, you see the craziness coming through the air and you're living around. So spirit right your mind this time. Make you feel dumb enough. Just like it's shouting off your crazy, if your old mind is going strong, crazy, very straight with the guitar, will come and will be one of those things that will put you into the place where you're going to learn to replace everything out there. What's on time to put into your mind about time. You're going to understand we're going to be walking the line that all of us do walk us down the road, there's pushing, we do talk about the things that are banging everywhere. Oh my, did you get scared? Let's live a normal life. The things are going to happen as we go through the strife. Going to conquer everything. Wake up, people, and that was that on the head. Stop wondering you're dead. Oh no, did you hear the word resonate? Oh no, this is me. Cause I was out there and I'm spitting the rhythm and rhyme resonate. With the craziness that comes off the tongue and the lips that I kiss. The beauty and perfection that is the natural world that you and I to go through this craziness with the bliss that is coming at you as you fall decide I ain't ever learned this truth that is out there, so I'm gonna get this statue. We are all gonna be the ones who do before truth and what needs to be a human being and to stand tall. Oh my, did you see the wars out there? Once upon a time, as you did curse the thing they did try to make us bear with the burdens that were craziness. They're putting our mind into a place where we can never align truth of what is and what we're gonna have to do with this. So God will be to a place you're gonna be the ones who are gonna have to face. And once upon a time, we're gonna do that. We only want to put up there on crazy hills as we do get a first all the time as we go through crazy fantasy that you and I are every bit into our line and you and I do decide that everybody out there gonna be the one who gonna time. I got you to place everybody gonna have to use oh my thinking is gonna be scared you as we do trust everything in the end that you must. Anyway. In that realm, I'm just gonna get something to drink real quick. My voice for some reason is getting harsh. Fuck. I got a tape on. When you didn't see how amazing it was. See, I'm in this hotel right now, right? I almost didn't get to stay. I wonder who at the hotel's gonna be my fan now. I'm gonna swear everybody this is a like swear of secret United States official fucking business top secret shit, dude. We're not supposed to fucking smoke in the room, right? I got in trouble for smoking in the room. So I found marijuana in my bed and shit. I was like, what the fuck? This is mass, man. It's like mass, dude. We do whatever the fuck we want, mass. You don't even understand. Like we fucking smoke fucking joint on the street, buy fucking marijuana, grow, what is it, 26 plants in a fucking household? We carry around ounces wherever the fuck we go. Do whatever the hell we want to do in life. So I just changed what I'm gonna live for the next fucking 20 years. And just enjoy myself being a legal, law-abiding citizen doing everything that I'm gonna do on this earth to smile and be happy. And pour a glass of the sea ice. Did you guys ever have sea ice before, man? They package it like fucking vodka. You use it when you try recipe. But gee, tiny bubbles coming at you. See what I'm say today. You know. Hey, I'm sitting there. My buddy, I got so many bottles of Grey Goose over there. As a kid, I grew up with, right? I knew when I was in second grade, I walked in the classroom in second grade. I'm like, for the first day of my class, and fucking, we're like looking out the window and just like fucking walk across the country like this, you know, fucking suck. You know, heard me say, hey man, what's up? How you doing? And I was like, holy shit. I know the kid fucking ever since then. I'm fucking 44 years old right now. I met him when I was like fucking 7. So I buy the kid fucking like tons of fucking vodka all the time because he loved vodka. I never understood vodka. So one time we're sitting together and I'm like, I don't fucking understand vodka. I don't know why you like it so much. You know, we're just having a normal fucking conversation. And it's just like, So I don't know. Well, the thing is you got to understand alcohol is like somebody burns when it goes down. It's every day is your mind. It's bringing together natural gifts of the earth. It's the fruit that you love and the vegetables like fucking decaying into perfection. It's a natural process within the earth. It happens on the cliffs of Moher that you see every time. The grapes and apples pile up again from the vines. They cover the entire face. You know, into the sea ice again that you see. By the perfection of it, everyone's stuck like it. Because I just think the whole names of I feel it burn. But he's just Paul like. They're pounding us tsunami, Chris Davis tsunami. You know, make a Pope guy. All Polish guy. I'm sorry to all the Polish people. I have learned how to increase the intelligence of you all to be able to screw in the light bulb faster if there are 30 of you in one room. He's forgot how to kind of let us know. So I would slant. And I love you. Good interview today. It was crazy. Went up to freaking New York. Had a fucking crazy interview in upstate New York. Attorney stuff. I'll go back, celebrate, enjoy my night. Everything gonna go good. Now, they're having my shot. I need to get my other medication home. Get marijuana so instrumental to bring your mind back to reality. You know, perfectly legal. Well, can you show something that's legal in Massachusetts on TV in faggot fucking? Well, can you show something that's legal in Massachusetts on TV in this country in another state? I have no idea, dude. No clue. I don't know. Did you do that? Welcome to the Midnight Round once again. My friends, we're traveling along the natural gifts of the earth. We're getting the crazy rebirth of the gifts of the earth. A little bit of alcohol, a little bit of Mary Jane coming at you. It's going to make your fall, make it fall. Maybe you see through the haze of your life and remember you're having better days. Your mind is mesmerized and collapse everything was built in the laboratory in the factories like the Prozac and the Ritalin and everything else is bad for you and me. And you're going to understand synaptic gap in the neurons in the mind you perceive. Oh my, it's going to lag as the axon and the dendrites come together within the place where you would weather the normality of what should be past the blood-brain barrier of you and me. Oh no, is that a possibility, or is it just you have yet to perceive exactly what goes in the stomach comes from another mouth, and do you own it? Oh my, what do you see? What can you touch with your hands? It will be the crazy fantasy of like the neurons that are out there, gives the earth all natural shape. It will come to you from somewhere. Oh my, I can't create a birth. I hope you understand the thing you realize was upon a time when you can get through the Mary Jane smoke because it's really bad. Oh, hey, somebody got lost on the way. Get up in the night today. You want to see exactly what's going to be on this bed. I should stand up like, inhale this haze. Sativa bud, I guess it's right out, you know, energetic. How many followers do I have today? How many followers do I got? I see like 10. 10 people on my freaking channel. What the hell's going on with that, dude? They saw me smoke marijuana online. Yeah, it's perfectly legal at Mass. As long as you're in Mass, you can freaking smoke marijuana. I'll back it. With the United States opposite of America. Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Hawaii, Idaho, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Virginia, Washington, West Virginia, Wisconsin. Wyoming. It's crazy here in the Midnight Round. It's shit real. Did you see that? They're smoking marijuana. What you do? Legal on that. Now, what do I do with this, though? I want to keep smoking. The apples come from the tree and they stimulate you and me as we got tired. Then you understand the debate that put you into a place where you would have to make a truth that would come between you and I. Take me into a place where you're gonna be the one to chase me. There, into the sun, into somewhere we're gonna be everything that they care about me. Place the craziness, crazy hate, really happiness upon what we hate. Oh my, did you understand space we travel every single moment? Times that we lead the way into a future where everybody gonna be the same. For me and you as we all through this side of me tomorrow. Upon the time we go to rest the craziness inside of your mind. So that if we experience this life and we live through the day and you made up your mind, don't you understand? Everything that's in your hand was given to you once upon a time. Yeah. So come with me as we all know the truth that will be for us. Once upon a time again, there's women and men who called upon to bear this crazy burden once again, so that you and I can exist. And men, all the wounds they inflicted upon us once upon a time, throughout existences were twisted upon the craziness of the mind as we incline the cliffs and the grapes do fall down into the happiness where the apples will be. Hold on, and you see the citrus tree again. Do you understand, my friend? We're about to live in the world again. Oh my, did they go after the truth of what we had within our hands? So that we had to be the one to protect the things that we would have to suture in the future so that everybody would be able to bring themselves to a place. But everybody gonna be the one to eat and raise everything that they had to do until that everything I did, that is everyone that they love and that they will always run around and play the games like that they want to play each and every time they want to live the social that we all make it crazy. We're supposed to have no love, space, and time. But I'll tell you what, we gonna supply, we supply everything that's coming at me and you. As we do everything that we gotta do. Oh my, keep trying to escape the truth that I'm saying to you as we all do down here we do things that will live and that will always be something will mend you so that we all get ready. And then you and I once upon a time. You supply everything in your way. Us into the night so we can still see the butterfly would create so we would spread our wings and you will know how to fly like me. Mine should be the call in every single word and foot land upon your heart. Let it bring me that crazy truth you and me. We're all out there, crazy reality we're living in. There, see that we should then change goddamn thing in regards to the button. Say we would pass. So everybody just looked up and said, "Where the hell we come from here?" Oh my! Listen to the craziness and everything inside. So we will be the one that oh now don't go and touch the things at my side. If I reach for your arm, my brother, I know we both will combine in what is right and what we should have done. And once upon a time, as the truth out there does light, as you and me are playing on the fantasy that we live in. I'll fit you on with the spirit to everything that's opened up my mind and to whatever it is that we all have. And in lovely wheelchairs until the end of time. Yeah. Take me into a place where everything was. The people that I held on to, but I never thought of could make me, because all was put to everyone and all of us who came to me together forever. I mean, you. Another drink real quick. I'll get back. There's Sarah in a second. No, I don't get that. What am I doing? I just wanted you to be able to speak for yourself, Peggy, no matter how offensive you believe me to be. I just thought that are better than putting toilets in people's heads and speaking the truth of the fact is to allow a perfect one to try to rationalize the things that I care about and the things that I say in the least violent way possible, no matter how hateful the speech may be. If I'm that angry, I guess we really don't have a problem. Did you say something sweet? Hell comes all people sometimes. So, this was how I'm not supposed to smoke in here anyway. So I just think I smoke pot. I may have. I don't remember. Let's see what the Italian is doing. Little devils. See, it's okay. Myself, Christ and the devil themselves, they look to get me. Oh my, you can feel the craziness inside you last night. Let me just try one more time. Really fucking high. This buzz like fucking like 25% THC. I'm like, what the fuck? I don't know if I can store like indica or sativa. I think I told a story the other night too. I love sativas because they're energetic buzz, right? I'll buy it. I will watch this. She's name it that, right? This shit don't happen on TV. So anyway, back to the hotel room with all the 50 states in it. We all got a safe place to stay tonight, guys. Should we fucking figure out how many of us there are out there in the United States in 2020 or whatever New Year's is? We fucking have a good fucking time, you know. I'm going to college this year, dude, again. I'm going to relive that day when I went to law school. I'm sorry, law school. I am going to make it both, maybe. Then we can come down ourselves as assholes. We need to make sure we can find them and kill them. Stop with the beers. All the beers with them. What'd you say? You interfere with my communications? Okay, so here I am inside the hotel. I'm going to find $250. Jesus, here's everybody watching, but these guys got two. I'm forgiving guy. Oh my god, I heard the Romans are a little what? Oh shit. Only I can laugh like this. So I spider what? You think I'm funny? I'm funny how? Oh shit, he's caught me. And you get fired for marijuana smoking a fucking vagina of a fucking like whore. He was in AA doing the war and just agonizing this and then a drop. Oh shit. This is live. Let's go back to here. Your marijuana smokers page, and they just created this character. It's been here all along. You gotta tell that. No, watch this shit out. Viewers 0. Oh no, there's the one. Oh, that's myself. How would you find the one viewer? If you were the one viewer out there, I think this is gonna work. You were the one viewer out there, so what would you do for your friend at the midnight round? I'm just saying because I know I can't like this marijuana cigarette in my fucking hotel. Just no smoke. Marijuana's legal. Oh, but you can't smoke it. You smoke in public, you know? So how can you prevent me from exercising my rights when I'm on vacation, dude? Fuck. You are on vacation. We're going to make you fiend. If I'm still alive, I may be slightly screwed. So I may try to get some people off the hook and may have like gone too far. But all I'm thinking about right now is the CIA. Funniest video ever of a dude getting shit faced on YouTube and getting kicked off forever. Oh wait, the CIA. Yeah, it's fine. He has his friend named Pete. And he said, whenever you drink the vodka, throw it back. It's the only other vodka in the burn. So I think only the CIA is alive. That'll be alright. That's not interfere with my stomach like that. I'd have to ensure that that didn't happen because I'll put that wrong, right? Good job. Check again. Let's listen to good music. I'm going to listen to my beautiful friend that I haven't listened to in a couple of years, Ani. I'll be the happiest I've been in like months because she always makes me that way. And that's just what it is. Alright, so here we go. I'm sitting here looking at the freaking, who's got their little like fucking animations and shit here? Whatever, like when you turn on Bing's got their like freaking pictures. But I hate Bing because it's like so in your fucking face, you know? Here, back to YouTube. Ooh. I guess it's something I'm voting public now, ain't it? I will pick it up on the black web if you got a problem with it, and then we'll fucking be pulling the fucking, what was that crazy movie I watched? Purges every night. Any more marijuana, I think. There's like my heart just started thumping and shit. And I think like, I felt like my mind could get tanny by some shit I didn't want to think. Fucking, I'll be here holding my cock and balls and my drinkings on my heart and my fucking thoughts get better. You guys enjoy it. Have a good time. Oh shit, that ain't the way I look right now. Oh yeah, it is. These girls are trying to look up your fucking smoking jacket. Oh yeah, we got everything going. Now my best friend's Lions. I haven't seen those guys in a long time so far.
I used to manage my team with spreadsheets. It was a nightmare. And then we switched to Monday.com. Monday.com is a platform to track everything your team is working on. We use it for all our projects: marketing, product development, HR, creative productions. It gives a sense of everything falling into place. Seriously, if you manage a team, you need to use Monday.com. I did it. I made $1 million in my business this year.
My friend, you die.
All from one online course. Me to myself in my apartment as I watched my Stripe account jump from 998,000.
Hello, this is Daryl Ehrlich, and this is the Billings Gazette Vietnam Voices series, a series by the Billings Gazette by Master Lube. And today, I am very lucky. We've got a very special story for you. They had guys that actually jumped off the train at different stops because it took us down to Fort Jackson and Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And we got off the train. We had 2 Ds, and the windows are nailed back in through the whole thing again. So I went in the restroom and coughed up phlegm, drank cold water, try to get basic training. So that was patient. Then you should be in combat. This is the way I understood it. If you weren't very well educated, then the Army should train you so you could have something to do. And I know I had a black fellow that when I got out of college, acting like a 17 or 18-year-old anyway. Right. So you kind of accepted that probably one way or another you're going to get it happen. Right. Were you afraid of Vietnam at the time? I mean, it was quite a bit. So I thought I had that advantage, and I was just sort of, what are you going to do? That's it. Well, after Fort Polk, which was known as the armpit of America, so some friends of mine took me down in the Mekong Delta. Flew out of Oakland, stopped at Hawaii for 20 minutes. So I did get to see Hawaii. Right, for 20 glorious minutes. It's on my bucket list. It's not that far away. And flew over Wake Island and then did a circle job. It's hot and humid, but I'd been in Ohio for a long time, and it's hot and humid in the summer. Same type of thing. And you were in Louisiana. Although probably during the Louisiana is supposed to be closer to what you're going to see in Vietnam, and they try to make it, but nothing is like it really is. But they try to do a good job. But hot and humid, smelly, equipment bustling around, and as I remember, there was no artillery going off or anything until they got to shipped down in trucks. And down to Dong Tam, which is outside the major city in South Vietnam, My Tho. And Dong Tam was being built as I was there, dredged out of the Mekong River to get it above the water level. And so it was muddy, dusty. I came in close to evening, and some sergeant put me over. He said, they're out on the boats now. We have to wait till morning. And there was artillery going off. And you just sort of look around. You got a rifle. You got a duffel bag. So you know nothing. You're waiting to see what's going to happen next. Was it a shock to hear artillery coming in? Like you got there and already you got artillery, right? Yeah, that was artillery going out. The incoming, they had an alarm they had set off. They usually rocketed us incoming. Okay. And everything at this time was tents, looked like an old MASH movie. Okay. Tents with sandbags around them to a certain height to catch the shrapnel. If you got a direct hit, that's it. It's over with. And we would build bunkers. The CBs were there. And they had some pretty good sized wood and lots of sandbags to be filled. So you're always doing something. It's not like in the movies where you're hanging out somewhere, drinking beer, smoking pot, and everybody's having a good time to listen to music. This place was primitive.
Yeah.
Some of the base camps had massage parlors and everything you could think of, big PXs. This was primitive. So I waited until I could get out to the ships, and then you meet Ben, you're a new guy, and you have to know how that works. But we were, within 2 weeks, we were in a major battle that was written up in the magazines and books. And you just, go with the old guys, do what they say to do. And
Because that would be, what's being a, you said you have to know what being a new guy means. What does it mean?
well, the guys that were there, they all came from Fort Riley, Kansas, and they came over as a group. They all knew each other. They'd trained together. Their officers had been with them all that time. Now you're just a replacement. It's like walking into a club where everybody's together and you're trying to make friends. But the good thing is most people aren't going to treat you like, say, that's the new guy. And
Right.
They're going to show you things. And you don't know everything when you get there. You've had training, but they really know.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you, different things like, don't ever even walk around back in there. That's too brushy, because the VC would take a frag grenade and stick it in a sea ration can, pull the pin, so it's in there with the spoon. So when you pull the pin, the spoon comes off, that starts the fuse burning. So it'd be in a can. The cans, all the Army sea rations, all are olive drab, so that's good camouflage. Run a fishing line over to another point, and it's monofilament. It's very hard to see. You trip that, and the grenade pops out. You'll hear the spoon twang, and you got just enough time to hit the ground. And if you don't hear it, then you're out of there.
Yeah.
But booby traps.
Was that the best advice that the old guys gave you?
No, it was constant. It's a learning experience. If you weren't willing to learn and listen, you're nuts. We got one guy in, and he kept saying, I'm supposed to be in rockets. I'm supposed to be in rockets. I'm not supposed to be out here in the field. And I said, yeah, I'm supposed to be driving an APC, but you're out in the field, and so am I. And he's the first guy that stepped in a punji pit, which was kind of stupid, because if you had any knowledge of walking around out in the bush, you could usually spot a punji pit. And that was the end of him, because you get those things stuck in your leg, and usually had feces on them, and you're going to be infected. And so he was out, never saw him again. But that kind of attitude, you're alert all the time. If you aren't alert, you're going to die. And I walked point for 4 months.
Yeah.
You better be alert.
Did you find, first of all, primitive conditions, and then doing things like where you had to watch where you step? Did you feel you were well prepared, not necessarily because of the training, but because of your background and hunting outdoors? How did that affect you, do you believe?
A definite advantage, because I tracked animals and, looked for things on the ground. You could tell where something had been through here. If you came right out of the city, you were at a disadvantage. And somebody with any rank should then keep you from not being in a position where you're going to get killed.
Yeah.
They wanted the new guys on point. Now, when I say I was on point for 4 months, that doesn't mean every day I walked point, because sometimes you weren't in a moving situation, or your platoon wasn't going to be on point. But for 4 months, when it was our turn, I was always on point. And I remember feeling something on my boot, and I stopped, and there was a tripwire. And I was watching it. It goes over here, and there up in the tree was a Claymore mine, that, as I remember, about this big, aiming at the trail. So by being more alert, I'm talking to you because that thing was a monster.
Yeah, yeah. That has to stop you kind of cold in your tracks when you realize what that is, right? I mean,
Oh yeah, you're like, shit, I'm glad I didn't take another step.
yeah, one step.
Yeah, one step. And on the other side of the canal from us was a different unit, and they were hitting these toe poppers, I think they called them. It was a little pressure mine that would just blow part of your foot off, and you'd hear a bang and a guy scream. And that was going on over there, and I'm on point on this other side. And the captain called up and said, stay off the trail. Well, you're back in the brush or you're on the trail. On the trail, it's like summer in Montana where the mud turns to concrete. You can see if anything's been disturbed. You can see everything on the trail. So I stayed on the trail. But I didn't move real fast. Sometimes they want you to move faster. That's as fast as I'm moving. You know?
Yeah. That's. Let's talk a little bit about. So, how long after you'd gotten there did it take for you to get on a ship? Because you're on something that's kind of interesting that not a lot of people know about down in the South in the Mekong. Explain that. Let's talk about that a little bit.
I went out the next morning. What they had is World War II barrack ships, like you had the invasion of Omaha Beach and all. They're just troop carriers. You had all the troops down below. The Navy was up on top. They'd have some 40 millimeters, and I mean, it's just a transport ship. But it was air conditioned, and they had a heck of a galley, and they even had ice cream. And hooked to the ship was a big pontoon, and that's where all your web gear, grenades, your ammo, and your rifle were left. You couldn't come on the ship with weapons, which was a good idea. So on the side of the pontoon then were the landing craft, the monitors, and the gunboats that we'd operate off of. And it was tight fitting down in there, but you know, you're in a ship every night. They would slip the anchors and float down the Mekong River and then drop the anchors because the BC would try to target those ships, but not in the daytime. That could be full party. But at night, they'd try to do it. And then the ship wouldn't be there anymore because it's pitch black. And they ran gunboats around these ships all night long, and a big glop of lily pads would come floating down and throw a grenade in it. So you hear this thump, you know, through the hull of the ship, and that would go on all night. So it was a different world. You had the land base and you had the ships to operate off of, which was strictly get up at 3 a.m. to get you all up. You go get chow if you were capable of eating, thinking about, do you want a full stomach of food when you're going out, possibly get shot in the guts. In my case, I didn't eat much. And it was all red lights, so you wouldn't lose your night vision. Go down the ramp to the pontoon, get your web gear, which you always had set up. Don't buckle it up. Grab your rifle, make sure your canteens are full, and then get on the landing craft. And they had guys there because if you fell between the barge and the landing craft, the river's flowing by. It's a huge river. And they had what they called swimmers, but I never saw anybody fall in. But I was unbuckled because you're going to the bottom with that web gear on.
Yeah, that's a heavy pack.
I carried 8 grenades, 2 canteens of water. You might get 1 can of sea wraps if you could fit it in because we couldn't carry packs. And my ammo load, basic load, and you got your helmet. And sometimes they'd make you wear a flak vest, which was just hotter than hell wearing a flak vest. And it wouldn't stop a bullet, stop the shrapnel. So that's how that would work. You get into the landing craft, which looked like World War II Normandy, but the back of it was built up with some turrets with machine guns. and you're down in the well deck, just like you'd see in the movies. And then there's a ramp in the front that drops. And they would farm up in the river, and this is all in the dark, so the BC couldn't see which way you were going, even though how they know where you're going. And you go out in a line. Usually they'd have a couple gunboats in front, because when you got to a canal, they'd drag these anchors for mines to get the wires for mines and strip them off. And then there'd be a monitor, which had the heavy turrets up to 40 millimeter, and then us. And they'd have some place you're going to go. And you might not get there, because if you get ambushed, they're all dug in on the beach. They're in bunkers and in holes. You're in this metal contraption, and they shoot B-40 rockets at you, and bullets are bouncing off, and there's firing going on everywhere. And you could fire over the side, stand up and fire, and they'd be looking for where they're going to dump you on the beach. And you just always hope you can get dumped in front of a bunker, and then you get off that thing as fast as you could. Sometimes you get off and immediately be stuck in the muck.
Right, let's talk about the mud there. It's not just normal mud. This is a place that's always wet and muddy, correct?
It's a swamp. You get stuck in the mud to the point that guys would have to come over and pull you out. And crossing, sometimes it was like pudding, so it was just so gooey you could walk through it. Might be up to your waist. And that's why grenades and ammo is waterproofed. And but several times I've seen people get stuck, and I'd been stuck. In fact, I went across one canal where I was up to my neck walking across it, and I stepped in a hole and I went underwater. So I'm trying to get my feet moving, because you got enough weight with all the ammo and all you're carrying that you're on the bottom, you aren't going to float. And I was waving my rifle around, and a friend of mine came over and pulled me up, because I couldn't
Wow.
Now the choice was I could have dropped everything and gotten out of there, but then I would have lost all my equipment. But it was constant mud and water. Rice paddies are flooded, and your feet's skin starts coming off of them. Didn't wear socks. Some guys tried socks, and then you put a pair up near your helmet to dry and have some on. But as soon as you step in water, you're wet. Now you got like a wet towel wrapped around your foot, because combat boots have drain holes in them. When you come out of the water, and spit the water out. So our time in the field was limited by when you start having your skin coming off, because you can get trench foot.
Wow.
And then you're going to be on light duty, and then you're missing more men. So you had to always watch what the condition.
How did you know about when you needed to not be back in the field with your feet then?
That was up to the medics.
Okay.
And several of us got ringworm pretty bad. It was mainly up to your waist, because your pants were always wet, and everything up to your waist was wet a lot. And that put you on light duty for a couple of days, and they had calamine lotion, which there were certain places you don't want to put calamine lotion on.
I can imagine.
Which I won't mention, but you'd have a new guy who'd say, hey, be sure to put some of that down there.
Right.
And, it's like you're on fire then. But
Right.
so you get over that. And mosquitoes are just the terrible thing. They're out at dark. They're huge. And all you can do is put bug dope on. So you have your hands and your face exposed. So you got to get that on your hands and face. Now they're in about your ears. It's just buzzing. And you could wake up in the morning, your lips real swollen up, or your eyes closed, because you lick your lips, and now there's no lotion there when you're asleep in a depression with a guy. Those things bite you. I've been bitten right through my fatigues. It's got to be pretty heavy duty mosquito to go through fabric.
Right, that is a heavy dude. Was that the worst of the natural? I mean, I've heard about snakes, I've heard scorpions, I've heard now also mosquitoes. Were mosquitoes the worst?
Well, to me, they're worse because they irritate you all night. Some people freaked out over the leeches, but
I've heard leech. Yeah,
the leech isn't any problem at all. It doesn't spit back in. It sucks blood, and you don't even know you have a leech on until someone sees it or you see it. And they're easy to remove, and they don't leave really an open wound. Ants down in the Delta, ants pretty much couldn't live in the ground because of the wetness, so they'd live in a tree. You made a mistake of leaning against a tree, and they got on you, you're going to have guys come over and help you and get your shirt off because they're going to just be biting you. And I mean, you get swarmed by them. So you soon learn that if you're going to lean against something, look at it pretty closely. All you need is those ants on you once. But mosquitoes, yeah, you get malaria. And I got malaria. And they had malaria pills. You didn't always get those. It's just sort of like salt tablets. You're supposed to take those quite a bit, but you could only have so many with the medic, and you just didn't get all that stuff.
Right.
And I got dysentery, which was another.
That's a mean disease too.
Another reward of getting into something or getting in your mouth.
Yeah.
And they said some of us had worms when we left there that were in our bowels, but they had determined they weren't going to be any problem, and they'd finally just go away. But it was nice to know.
Yeah, it's a reassuring thought. Like, the worms that are living in you, they'll eventually.
I mean, everybody had to be checked for VD, the blood test, before you left the country. But the combat units, there aren't any bar girls hanging around, and we didn't have any of that on our base anyway. If you snuck into town, I mean, I saw one guy, he wasn't going home with us. He was going to go to the Philippines because he'd gotten some kind of ED. They didn't know what it was, and he was in sad shape. You don't go back to America with that, so they give you a blood test.
Wow. What about so you're out there? What are these? So you land, the front flies open. You get off as quickly as you can. Then what?
Then you're in the jungle and you spread out. If it's a firefight, then you're going to be looking for cover where the firing's coming from. But most of the time, you're going to get off and there's going to be nothing going on. You're going to get organized, what squad is where, what, and you're going to move to some objective. The canals are pretty heavily vegetated around all the canals. And when you get on the ground in any of these canals, you'd start thinking these Vietnamese have been building bunkers and digging holes for hundreds of years because every tree line and these canals all had bunkers. The good thing is when you get off and they aren't occupied. Yeah. Now, mostly what you're fighting down in the south, at least then, is Viet Cong, right? Viet Cong, one of the worst battles we were in, or actually thought we were going to get overrun.
Okay.
They have green tracers, we have red tracers, and it was a hot battle. We had lots of dead and wounded. And I was in a position with a guy shot through the groin, and we didn't have any more morphine, and he was miserable and loud. And I thought, we're going to get overrun. And then you have to consider, what will you do? You're going to run out of ammo. And what are you going to do? You're going to let them kill you? You're going to let them capture you? Or are you going to kill yourself? Yeah. And now this is happening pretty quickly, right? Oh, yeah. I mean, so you're trying to weigh all these options while you're trying to just hold a position, correct? You know how much ammo you have. You aren't getting any more. Right. I mean, if you can move around and get to a dead guy or a wounded guy and get his ammo, that's all right. But in this case, you couldn't move around. The firing was just intense. And before, I'm sure it was a battalion we'd come up on, and that was a big group, and they were dug in. And then were able to get an artillery barrage, and they dropped artillery just right in front of us and moved it around. The next day, we got the wounded together and had the dead piled up, and we went into their camp. And I remember there was a guy laying there. He'd been, what's the word for it? Eviscerated.
Eviscerated, yeah.
Yeah, and he had a machine gun, and he was definitely not South Vietnamese. He was a big guy. He was North Vietnamese or Chinese, but he was standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Anytime you have a bomb, if the jets come over and they drop a bomb, and you see it tumbling, you can keep your head up and watch, because that's napalm. One of the best things ever invented for a war like that. If that bomb drops down, it's coming down like that, you better get down, because that shrapnel, it just tear trees down. I had a big chunk thump right in front of me. And without thinking, I went to move it and just burnt the crap out of my hand.
Wow. Yeah.
But I didn't think, I think it thunk. Now, if it thumped back a little further, then I wouldn't be here.
Right. So how did you get out of that situation? You think you're going to be overrun, out of ammo, you got a guy wounded. How did that turn out?
The artillery saved it.
Okay.
They put artillery on them, and that's the end of that fight. Even though they were close, we had some of them really close. You can bring the artillery in real close to you.
Right. If it's dense jungle like that, how do you know what you're shooting at? How do you know where they are, and how do you know get your sense of place and shooting?
Muzzle flashes and where the tracers are coming from.
Okay.
See, a tracer doesn't start tracing until it's out away from the rifle a ways.
Okay.
That's to keep someone seeing that the tracer started at your rifle. And that was a big encampment. Now, they hauled away most of their dead, but you can see the blood trails. And if they're in a really good bunker, it takes a direct hit. They might have concussion and lose their hearing. But those things are made out of mud and logs, and the mud's like concrete. So you need a direct hit. And then you have to go and look through the bunkers. And they left dead behind, but you could imagine how many of them actually did get killed.
Yeah. And
it was estimated as a battalion. And I never did this body count thing and all that, but they had after action reports, and they'd say there were 316 killed, and they'd do that kind of thing. And I never knew who did that counting or what that was all about. But
right. Well, did you get a sense? So, how often, when you would go out on an ambush or a patrol, how often would you get fire? How often was it constant that you find yourself in combat, or was it?
Well, if you got ambushed, then you're in combat.
Yeah. And
I never had anybody set off a booby trap or any ambush sprung on us when I was on point, which I was happy about, and then I was paying attention. But when we set up an ambush, if you don't have many people, we're always under strength. If there's two of you in a position, and you have to know where the other positions are, and if you can get resupplied, at the end of the day, you get resupplied with helicopters, you get sea rations, water, ammo. So you might eat some sea rations right then, and then as it gets dark, you move the whole position somewhere else, and where you were then gets mortared, because that tells you someone's out there watching you. Now they don't know where you are because you moved in the dark. So you set up, if you have a 3-man position, you're just going to get more sleep. A 2-man position, you're going to, half the night you're awake. And you got to make sure when you wake up the next guy that he's awake. Some people aren't good waking up. You have to make sure they're awake. And when they're moving around and they assure you, that's when you can lay down. And if it's a 3-man position, you lay down next to somebody because you're freezing your ass off.
Right.
And I remember waking up one morning and I was just so rested. I didn't know what was going on. It just felt so good. And this guy's asleep. He'd been asleep all night. Now wasn't a laughing matter.
Yeah.
So you'd have any number of people might do that, especially when they're new. So you took any of them that did that. The next night, you put them out on a listening post out in front of the company with a radio. And like the sergeant said, now let's see which one of you guys wants to sleep.
Yeah.
Get over it real quick. Those people you're so close with, you trusting them, they trust you. I mean, you can't get any tighter with people than when you're in combat. And you got to watch the new guys. And if you don't help them, they get you killed. But you got to watch the grenade has a cotter key through it and a ring, and you stick your finger and you pull the pin out. But you bend that cotter key all the way around. When you want to get that pin out, you're going to get it out. But some of them would just have it slightly bent over because they're afraid they couldn't pull the pin, and that thing gets stuck on some brush and the pin comes out. So you had to check their equipment, see what they're doing. This is after I got some rank.
Yeah.
It's up to someone else when you're lower rank. Because I was an E1 when I left the United States. They had to make me an E2 when I got there because you couldn't have an E1 in Vietnam, the way I understood it. Then I went to E3, E4, which was a specialist. Then I was sent up to Bearcat, a big base camp up north, for non-commissioner officers training to be an E5. So I was a sergeant E5. And that made me a platoon sergeant. And at one time I was a platoon leader. But, you always felt funny if you didn't have your rifle with you. You never set it down where you can't reach it. You don't walk away from your rifle. Because, as they would say, if the S hits the fan, and you go to the ground, you better have that rifle with you. I mean, and you had to make sure people understood you. Didn't walk away and leave your rifle over there. What the hell's wrong with you?
Right. Right. So some of it was training in the new guy, right?
Yeah, you had to just make sure they didn't. I mean, people don't normally walk around with grenades. And back in the States, they'll have these pits. You go in the pit, there's a guy in there with you. And you pull the pin and throw the grenade. Well, people have been known to drop the damn thing with this sergeant and you in the pit. And the guy has to reach down and get it real quick and throw it out. And that's why he's in with you. So you've thrown a few grenades, but now you got grenades hanging on your web gear. And you want to make sure those pins are bent over. It's stuff like that. And how are they carrying their ammo? Is your canteen full? Because you can't drink enough water when you first get there. And then after you're there a while, you need a lot less water. You don't sweat like you did before.
Yeah.
Acclimated.
Yeah. What was the morale or camaraderie within your platoon, within your group over there? Was it pretty good? I mean, you mentioned when you came in, it was like breaking into a club where everybody knew each other. That seems like it might be kind of hard. What was the camaraderie like?
Well, in the beginning, it was hard because those guys all trained together, knew each other. They all first name basis. I mean, everything after that becomes last names. You don't use first names. But after you're there a while, it's just like any other job, show me what you do here, and in a couple of months, maybe I can do what you do. So it's all training. You get on the job training, and if you're listening and paying attention, you're going to probably be all right. Anybody can catch a bullet just by chance. When I had that mortar round go off, it was about 10 feet from my head, and I just had the B-40 rocket injure me on the boat. I completely lost my hearing from the concussion, and I could see people's lips moving. That was scary. I mean, I was deaf, and I'm going, how long is this going to last? This is no good. I'm following people, and I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
So my senses were screwed up and it started coming back. But yeah, that was a little bit scary. I mean, I had a bullet hit a wall during Tet. It was right in front of me. Been up a little higher, it would have hit me. It's just random. There was one guy from Chicago out with us, and he was one of the old original guys, and he's the only one that ever brushed his teeth out in the field because you wanted to drink that water, and nobody brushed their teeth. So he'd be brushing his teeth, and right after I got wounded, he caught a piece of shrapnel, which was lucky for him, square in the mouth. So he had 4 lips and no teeth, and the teeth stopped the piece of shrapnel. And here's the only guy that ever brushed his teeth. Now he had no teeth.
Wow.
And that's what I mean. It's all random. I mean, you can get yourself killed. One guy got a Dear John letter, which is just brutal that anybody would send a letter to a guy over there and saying, his wife, I've started seeing another person, I'm going to want a divorce. And he sat up during a battle and he was killed. He just sat up.
Wow.
It's really sad.
What was the, so you were going,
Some beer. You don't want to get drunk
right.
because it could be saddle up or going out, such and such units in full contact. So on the boat, it was also, we had ready reaction like that, so you never knew when that might happen. That's why you want to go in the Navy or the Air Force.
Right. What was the, and then when you,
We got rocketed, it had water squirting out all over the place. And they'd patch that up. And the only thing we did with the swimming pool is they wanted us to get our gear on to see how you could stay afloat and all. That's the only time we were around that swimming pool. And there were guys that couldn't swim at all. I mean, I pulled a guy out of canal. That is, they can't land where there's trees around, so they might just hover.
okay.
When I get stuck in the mud, then you jump out and get stuck in the mud.
Right.
But, the helicopter guys, that was your bus. And there's an M60 machine gun on each side. The thing's made out of aluminum. Doesn't stop bullets, but you'd sit in there sit on the edge of the door with your legs hanging out, and it was all right if the thing made it where you're sitting. But sometimes we took trucks out of Dong Tam,
Mm-hmm.
and they had tin roof. So if the first one doesn't get you, you run like hell. Marines, because they had a major city. They had well, the word came down, we have to move, there's something going on, you're going to be picked. A lot of stuff went up on the roof because you can always throw a Molotov cocktail on top of an APC. That'll give you some discouragement.
Mm-hmm.
So we were set up for that. We didn't have any wall rockets, and they just flattened the APCs. They hit them because of mines. To be on top of it, you hanging on for your life. There's some guy driving the thing that's probably 18 years old going like hell.
Right. Slow down. What's the, so you did that, what happened? Because Tet wasn't just one day, it was kind of a whole thing. Tell me about your involvement in Tet, then what happened?
Well, we fought building to building, noise up on the roof. So I shot up through that tin roof with my M16. And a little while later, another grenade went off. And it kind of came to me that someone's up there. And I certainly didn't kill him. So I went out through a window on the roof around the corner. And here was and I just grabbed him. I should have killed him. But this is looking way back because as far as there's regular gas
Situation. Ants are eating, human flesh.
under my back.
Yeah,
So-
not gonna,
And this was coming from an Arvin compound, so I didn't know if they mistaked us. I didn't have back. I think we had 27 major arteries. They're supposed to stay back. They'd fire mortars and flares for us at night. And they brought the recoilless rifle. And you couldn't carry that in the field usually because nails with fins on them. It's exactly what they look like. They're just packed in there. They fired that. It was the end of the machine gun. And when I went up there, there was blood trails from that place. And, you know, there was someone in the trees, so I had them blast the trees around us. And the mud was up to my calves, and it was just hard to pull them. But we never left our people.
Yeah. Is it hard seeing other guys? I mean, you talked about a guy getting hit and being in pain. That's got to be hard to keep concentrated, I would imagine, on the task at hand. And hard.
Canal that looked like Snoopy's nose, which is a canal that looked like Snoopy's nose. Thing where you had firing squad. If there's just a little bit of firing, there's a bunch of them. They're going to just keep on moving into it. I came back. They sent you back if you could still move around and all. They sent Takahata back, and his wrist still didn't work right. And after they fixed that cut across his, and one guy, he was crawling along and he took a bullet through his buttocks and out the other side. The rocket landed right on the supply hut and killed him. I mean, what are the chances?
Yeah, he makes it through both of that.
It's that's the way it is. It's all random.
Was it? Let's talk about how you were injured. You got a Silver Star, a Bronze Star with V, which is combat, and then also a Purple Heart. Let's talk about how that Silver Star, because I read the commendation on that. How did that happen? Tell me about that.
Well, the Silver Star was VR on the beach, and they're shooting at both sides of the canal. The enemy shooting at us. It was half full of water, and the Navy started cranking off automatic grenade rounds, and they're coming right in the ditch, just progressing down toward me. And I realized they don't know where we went to, and other diseases. But you go, well, I'm pretty thirsty, but I'm not. And I was real sick back in the berthing area, and so guys helped me to the Navy doctor, and he had a corpsman. And the Navy doctor looked me over and says, "Yeah, you got malaria." And
survive kind of holding off people, and how does it end? How do you get out of that?
well, it slows down. They'll finally retreat. And some of them were terrible. And one had worked with the 514th VC Battalion for 7 years, and he'd gone Chu Hoi. They paid him $55 a month. And this is probably where he grew up, and he knew everything, and he spoke the language. So I got tight with him right away. He told me he could speak some broken English. He wanted a 45. I made sure I got him a 40 for explosion. So we lost 2 people through his dumbass trying to communicate with another unit. When I went to get my Purple Heart, because they were doing a hearing test on me up at Benoit, or maybe it was Bearcat. I don't even color on it. And I said, "Does it matter if my name is spelled wrong?" Because that guy, he jumped on that guy. He says, "All you do is type here. You can't even do that right." It's during monsoon season because you got great sunsets and there are flowers growing. And if you aren't, sometimes you're in an area there's going to be no combat because you're near a village and everybody's there. If they all are leaving, it's not with sea rations. But when she cooked it up in the wok, it was good, but the head and the feet were all in there because they don't waste anything. And that was a little strange. But
right.
Here's some give the kids candy if you had it. But if they're all around, nothing's going to happen. So,
yeah.
So they're civilians. They look like civilians. It's like terrorists. They look like you and me, but then they got a weapon or a suicide vest.
Yeah.
I mean, when that machine gunner on go out to see how he's doing, and you don't fire your rifle, if you can throw a grenade, it shows where you are. So, and no one smoked at night. I don't mean pot.
Right.
Our guys didn't smoke pot. You jump ahead. If there was anything here, I thought I might want to mention. See, I wrote out a script because I thought you were like a movie a movie producer, and I was going to be in a movie. So I wrote up this script for myself. December. I did it by months. I had 3 pages of script.
That's okay. You can read it.
And I think I've pretty much gone through everything. I didn't mention Lieutenant Fitzgibbons getting killed, did I?
No, you didn't. You want?
I wanted to mention he was a new second lieutenant, and I had a talk with him when he first got there, and he said this was his chance to save his life and show his family. He needed to do well here. I mean, that was his deal. And we had a couple of times we went out with him, and he was willing to listen and watch. And I got a 3-day R&R, in-country R&R, which was going to be up at Vong Tau. And you felt naked because you couldn't take your rifle. But while I was gone, he wore his insignia out in the field. And a guy jumped out of the hole and shot him right through the head. And I would have never let that happen. Never in the world. I always, it's sort of like I almost feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
He would have been alive if I was there, and I wasn't there. And I was underimpressed that someone else didn't notice that. He never saluted an officer.
Right. And you never wore anything that would.
You don't wear your rank, and in fact, you don't say "sir" out in the field unless you say it quietly. But you got to figure the officer is going to have a radio man with him, so he's already a target.
Right.
But yeah, that was a sad occurrence. We pretty much have gone over a lot of things.
Let me ask you a question, because you said something before we turned on the cameras. You said that when you received your Purple Heart, you didn't send it back because of your mother. Is that correct?
Yeah, I didn't send any of those awards back to my parents.
What?
Well, you read the thing. What would a mother think?
Yeah, it talks about you being in battle, but it also talks about serving heroically.
Yeah, but it also talks about being wounded and refusing evacuation, and it's not something your mother needs to know. And the Purple Heart itself means you've been wounded, and they're going to wonder, where did you get shot? So why put them through that? I just didn't send them back.
So did they learn about him eventually?
Yeah, once I was back, because you couldn't leave Oakland. I flew into Oakland when I left Vietnam, and you couldn't leave Oakland until you had all new uniform. Your other one you didn't have anyway, and you threw your combat boots in a huge pile of boots. They didn't want you wearing combat boots back in the world. And there are all these women there sewing. And they fit you for a whole new jacket, and anything you have, any award, any insignia has to be on there, right? The 9th Infantry Division, anything that's supposed to be on there. And then you're released. You got new shoes, pants. And they had those race riots going on in Oakland. I don't know what that was about, but I missed the cabs were a screw up, so I missed my flight anyway. And I always remember it was maybe 10 o'clock in the morning. I missed my flight. So I went to the bar, and some guy had bought me a beer because I was in uniform. And there was a guy that obviously wasn't a hippie. And that was a nice gesture.
Yeah.
The waitress just pointed at that guy and said, "Thank you." But, it was a hostile environment coming back in the United States from Vietnam at that time.
What was it like for you? What was your return like?
Well, my brother was working for General Motors Defense down in Santa Barbara. So my flight went to Santa Barbara before I was going to go back to my parents. And those guys at General Motor Defense wanted me to come into their theater and watch this machine gun they were working on that had, it was beltless and no cartridge case. Each round would just consume itself. The bullet would fly out. There would be no, none of these links flying out the other side of it. And you're nervous as hell. I mean, you're in a whole new, you're back in America.
Yeah.
So I sat in this theater by myself and I ran this movie and I wanted to know what I thought about it. And I couldn't think up any good questions.
Right.
I mean, I could later, but I couldn't then. So I thanked him and went about my way. But yeah, I wanted to get into civilian clothes because in California wasn't a very popular place to be running around at that time back from Vietnam anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you, when you were over in Vietnam and you were, did you write a lot of letters? Did you have any time to write? What was the kind of communication with home? Because obviously it was pretty much letters.
Yeah, letters. Well, I picked up a little tape recorder, this cheap little thing at the PX. You go to the PX and you go, where's all the stuff supposed to be in the PX?
Right.
And I would send a tape back to my parents every once in a while. And they could hear artillery in the background, but I never wanted to, everything's just fine, everything's good.
Right.
and you'd send letters back.
Right.
And the postage is free.
Sure. Did they write a lot to you? Did you get a lot of letters or correspondence from home?
Yeah, not a whole lot, but just enough because they'd have mail call. And the mail guy was from California, and he had a rope hanging on his uniform with knots in it. Each knot represented another month he'd spent there. And he was totally out of control. And he got a mailman's hat from the States he wore, and they couldn't deal with him. I mean, he was out of uniform. They just didn't want to deal with him.
Right.
But he
Kind
was
of a MASH-like character.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure he couldn't wait to get back surfing. But it was I would say about after 6 months, we'd pretty much gotten rid of all the old guys who came over together, and we were the guys hopefully have been there with you a while, and then new guys coming in. So. But yeah, there were times we'd get together. When you got on the ship, they'd try to have beer for you. You could have 2 cans of beer.
Okay.
And they'd have a big bucket with ice water in it, and these Falstaff beers would be floating on the top. And right away, that thing's been leaking, so nobody's going to take that. But you can drink 2 beers as fast, you're dehydrated.
Right.
And you had no tolerance for alcohol anyway, but you could get usually 2 beers. In the base camp, you could sometimes get more than that. In fact, we did a pig roast once. That was a good time. The Hawaiians, you bought a pig in the village, had it on a spit, had a big fire and charcoal going, and the head medical guy came over and said, I'm not condoning this. But these guys, they knew how to do it, cook it for a long time.
Yeah.
So we had a pig roast and beer, and that was
pretty good.
It's like with sea rations. When I was a platoon sergeant, sea rations come in a big box. Then there's individual rations. You looking at your watch?
Nope.
Well, I thought you
Nope, I was looking down here. I had a
So when you're going like this to me, is that being cut it up?
No, I want to hear about sea rations. I've never cut anyone off yet.
I would always turn the box upside down, open it and turn it upside down because I couldn't stand lima beans with ham. And there were some decent ones in there. Otherwise, the guy that can reach the fastest and got all the good stuff, and what's going to be left is ham and lima beans. So I'd tip them upside down, and you'd randomly have to take a box, and that seemed to be more fair. Also, being liked by the guys is a plus,
right?
Not a negative,
right?
You don't want to have anybody pissed off at you who's carrying a weapon around and hand grenades. So, and why not treat everybody as fairly as you could? And so that's what I always did. And some of that stuff was not good. And if you could get some C4, that's a plastic explosive, then you'd take a little piece of that and you'd open up like the cracker can, dump the crackers out and put some air vents in the bottom with your P38, put the C4 in and light it, and you could put your meal on top of that to heat it. And if you couldn't get C4, you could take the bug repellent and mix it with peanut butter, the little peanut butter jar, and that would burn and you could heat. But you weren't exactly building campfires.
Right.
Now, those helicopter guys, they just go over and open the Peacock and get some aviation fuel out, so they're in good shape. You know.
Wow. What about, a lot of the vets that have come in and have talked about, when they were over there, they would think about the world when they got back to the world here.
Mm-hmm.
There were conversations that would start when I'm going to go back, either I'm going to eat or I'm going to do this. Did you have those conversations, and what were you looking forward to coming back to?
Several things you miss at that age in your life. And they aren't all food, but yeah, you think about having a steak or a hamburger, drinking water. See, that water was made out of the river and it was purified, but it had a smell and a taste to it. Some people would put Kool-Aid in it to cover it up, but
right, it was a lot worse. And so what about when you did come home? How was getting back to normal life?
I was nervous for quite a while. There's a period you have to go through to kind of calm down. Even after I quit working a regular job, it took me months out here to not think about the work anymore. And it took me, now you might leave today, which hopefully they aren't firing. I know nothing about that.
I hope they're not either, but at least it's not I guess they got a full week out of me.
But you'd think about it if you left here. And I was nervous. You just have to calm down. I mean, some of these guys are going to interview, might drive a truck in a base camp or something, and they've got massage parlors, beer halls, PX where you can go in and buy a candy bar if you want. People cutting their hair. They got people polishing their shoes. Those big base camps with the rear echelon people are not like a combat unit at all.
Yeah.
And so it was a little bit jittery.
Yeah, it's hard to go. I imagine you're in Vietnam one day and then you're just coming back home a few days later. That's a pretty tough thing to go from combat to just civilian life.
Yeah, it's you don't exactly just sort of. Everybody, I imagine, handles it differently. And it's the people that didn't come home or the people that came home with terrible wounds. They're living with that then. That's why it really kind of pisses me off about the VA. And I did want to say something about the VA.
Sure.
This isn't Arizona, but the VA clinic over here, my doctor, I didn't see a doctor for 40 years after I got out of Vietnam because of some experiences with doctors over there. And so I finally saw a doctor. But I have Dr. Van Nice, it's VANNICE, and he's a laid-back guy, but a real doctor, and you have to see him at least once a year to stay in the program. And sometimes I see him more than once a year. He said, just check in if nothing's going on. Come over and I can talk to you. I asked him if I have PSD. I said, sometimes I think I'm a little weird. I don't sleep very well at night.
Right.
And he says, no, I don't think you have that. So I said, okay, because I didn't understand what it was. And then I was in the benefits section with a lady, Tina, that's her name, and she was just unbelievably professional. And she could get my records up, even where I signed something when I got back to the States. And I couldn't remember ever doing that. And she said, well, here it is. And she's a very professional lady. And she's the one I took a picture of me wearing my uniform to show her I could still fit in it.
Right.
Because we were kidding about that. But that bottom button is tight.
What about, do you think, what is, for you now looking back, what are the lasting effects? What did Vietnam do for you, positive or negative, for the rest of your life?
can't stop thinking about it.
Okay.
And as far as I'm concerned, it's affected my sleep. And I mean, it shouldn't. Look how many years it's been. Is it 47 years?
Okay.
And I'm 24 years over there, which was kind of crazy. And yeah, I'm not nervous. I sleep with a gun. Of course, the crime rate's gone up in Billings, and by the time you call the police, somebody might be throttling you. I'm not of the right size to wrestle with somebody.
Mhm.
So I sleep with a gun. I've got a carry permit. I've never felt things were that bad in Billings. You needed to have a carry permit, but I think the four-legged animals are a bigger threat.
Yeah.
And I keep the deadbolts locked. We lock the car as soon as we get out of it, and we lock the house.
Yeah.
So that did affect me that way.
Yeah. Do you think, let's talk a little bit about, you've never been back to Vietnam since?
Do you want to go?
No, not necessarily. Just curious if something.
No, I never have, but they are running vacations over there.
Is that an odd thing? Is that something that you do or not do? I mean, is it ever something you've considered?
Well, not at this point in my life. I'd rather go to Vancouver sometime here.
Okay.
And, have some fresh crabs and some seafood. You know? But, now, a friend of mine is going to Vietnam on a river trip, and he's going to go down the Mekong and over into Cambodia. Just holds 60 people. And I sent him an article out of the Wall Street Journal where this guy was eating food over there, and he had snake. And then he asked the vendor what was on the spit, and the guy, he couldn't understand what the guy said. And the guy said, "Wolf, wolf." He goes, "Oh," because he didn't see many dogs.
Right. One of the things that you gave to me here, it said, and it's important to remember, 58,372 Americans died, and they're on the wall. What do you think of when you either see the wall or remember, because you did in combat, you did see people die, you saw people wounded, you yourself were wounded. How does that, when you, to me, it's not, I don't want to say it's just a number, because it's not. Obviously, there's more going on with me, the reason I'm doing this project. But what do you, when you have a piece of literature like that, what do you think, and what do you hope? Do you think people are remembering it any more, or do you, how does seeing the wall and all those names affect you today?
Well, I was born in Walter Reed Army Hospital,
Okay.
Washington, D.C. So the first person that ever hit me was a captain. And true story.
No, I believe it. It's just a funny coincidence.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing the wall, but it's not on my top list of places to go. Washington, D.C. has a lot of crime, and, who wants to expose yourself to, this is so calm here. When I first arrived in Billings, people had their trucks running in a Walmart parking lot, and the door wasn't locked. It just wouldn't happen back east.
Yeah.
And my friend from high school said, there's very little going on, and I like to fish and hike and camp. So this was the place for me. But I guess I wouldn't mind seeing the wall. And the Mobile River Rainforest has a display they travel around with, and they're always having get-togethers. And I do think of some of the guys that I was with, where are they now? And I wouldn't mind seeing them, but you don't know if they're going to go to one of those reunions anyway.
Yeah. Do you keep in contact with any of them? You had a close camaraderie.
Yeah, I had one guy I'd call him every year, and I called, and his wife answered the phone, and she said, "God, Dick, it's so strange you're calling. He just died last night."
Wow.
Must have been in the head. But I'm in contact with no one, but I get the newspaper from the 9th Division, and I look on there who died recently, because we were all in the Agent Orange, and it's sort of like, when am I going to get some cancer from that? and I'm in their Agent Orange program at the clinic. But the government didn't recognize that until most of the people already died.
Have you had any long-term effects from Agent Orange?
I'm having a long time effect from being here doing this interview. No, I had finally my wife complained enough. I went and had a colonoscopy, which is the workup before you do the colonoscopy is sort of like going to basic training in the Army. Same type of misery.
Right.
You had one?
I know enough about them. Yeah,
Okay,
no, I'm
that's the worst part.
I've heard tell.
And I had one polyp, and the lady said it was just a 1 centimeter, just a tiny little thing, and removed it. 3 days later, she said it tested positive. And she said, and I can't believe it. And I said, well, I'm not believing it either. And she said, well, I just can't believe that little thing could test positive. I said, they made a mistake. They got the wrong person. She said that 3 times, and then she said, no, you got to come back in. And I got to mark where it was. Well, it means you got to do the same thing again. And I saw the surgeon. He said, well, it's like Russian roulette. It tested positive. If the cancer went through your colon, it spreads to your other organs, or we can remove 6 inches of your colon and we'll test it. Now, it may not have any cancer, but do you want to not do this? Of course, immediate thought is not do this. Sounds like a good idea. He was a young, impressionable guy. Then he had to look again, and it turned out I didn't have cancer in that section, but that's the first surgery I've ever had. The Billings Clinic was wonderful. It's a great place. I give it high points if you got to do something like that. But so now it's just a matter that wasn't a cancer recognized. Of course, there's a list. Only these cancers could be caused by Agent Orange. So you have to get one of those, and then I don't know what happens anyway.
Right. You still got to take care of it, right?
I'm not sure what that's all about. Maybe they're going to pay your hospital bill or something, but I don't know. I'm in the program, and even those Navy guys that were offshore, they're all out in the ocean because the river is emptied to the ocean.
Yeah.
They're all in the Agent Orange program, but that was fairly recently. They got that going.
Blue Water Navy, yeah.
Yeah. I was drinking the shit water.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If you got dysentery, you were.
Well, you're drinking they take it out of the river and purify it. They do their best.
So it's been 42, 7 years, 48 this year. Well, depending on when you went over, that you've been over there, since you've been over there. That's given you a lot of time, and I know you've done a lot of reading. How do you look at the Vietnam War today differently, or do you, than you did then? How do you look back on that right now?
Well, I never liked the fact that we were restricted by the politicians in the way you fought a war. And you should only fight a war to win. And that means kill more of them than they kill you. And with what went on back there in the States, that made it political, and the pressure, because that's what political people do, they bow to pressure. And a war we could have won and would have been over with us as victors. We didn't win, we pulled out. And it sort of reminds me of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Politicians shouldn't run wars. And I've talked to those guys that flew B-52s, and they had to come in a certain way every time. Well, that just made them a target for the rockets. I mean, everything was restricted. And you'd have to let the military run away.
What about when you brought it up here and went on, or how was that experience? Did it change your life?
I remember Thanksgiving and Christmas, about that. Of course, you got near Christmas and you're getting near Tet. And well, this is going to be a big holiday, so we're going to be laid back.
Right.
And everything.
Your experience too, were you able to?
I think a combat guy puts on Prick 25 radio for a while, but I got rid of it by signing off on the captain. captain, he didn't like it too much, so the radio went to another. And then sometimes you went 20 yards.
And all hell broke loose.
Sometimes you went 20 yards.
And all hell broke loose.
Winter for field maneuvers, and I've got 1 month until look, I'm mustering out. I'm not coming in. I'm getting the drill team, psychological tests and measurements. So when I take the entrance exam for the Army on your own, although it's not your decision to make, whether there were.
Was airborne training hard for you?
Well, who are you going to train? You're going to train each other, and that's pretty close to sea level. The government wanted research on need to go to the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam.
Okay, did you? That had to be scary. I'm guessing this is around 1966, 60.
I didn't have any.
And what do you remember about it?
Going out to your field gear, or it's raining on you and you're really wet.
Right, and it rains a lot there, and when it does, it comes down pretty furiously.
I was there for 18 months, 2 rainy seasons, 1 dry season. But the dry season is pretty wet.
Right, and hot too, right? So you're there, and you're going around to all these different.
Your report.
Okay. And so some of it, okay, so training sources had to do with give me the information I need, not all the information.
And this enemy unit came passing through my location with this many men, this many weapons. And when I finally got them traded, chit chat with them. And where are you going? What you up to? What's going to happen? Where have you been? And getting intel on military movement by the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I thought was pretty cool is once you know something and you get paid for it,